Hey everyone, welcome. Pastor Patrick Walker here. I am filming this on Monday, January 6th. We just had a snow. Got my snow gear stuff on. But I probably going to put this out on Thursday and make this public on Thursday. So just letting you know, I am in Genesis chapter 6. When men began to increase in number on the earth, and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God, referring to fallen angels, saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Now, we have extra biblical information about this particular passage. Hebrew tradition says that these were fallen angels. It even lists their names. They rebelled against God. This is, I think, also referred to in the New Testament as well. Peter talks about this. Rebelling against God, following Satan. They have sexual relations with human women. And it says they produced a half human, half supernatural being called the Nephilim. Verse 4. So it says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown, mighty men. I personally believe that where we get the stories from the Greek gods, like Hercules, for example, who had superhuman power, and supposedly his father was a god and his mother was a human. I believe that those legends kind of stem from the reality that we see here in Genesis chapter 6. So this, I believe it was real, though I think that over time, depending on the culture, the civilization, of course, information could have got spun. But verse 5, one of the consequences of this union was that man's sinful nature became even more wicked. And we see in verse 5 that essentially this took over the entire earth. The inclination of the thoughts of man's heart was only evil all the time. And the Lord was grieved that he would make man, and he decided to put an end to human life and start over. Now, something for you to consider on this particular passage, it is possible, and I think this is a reasonable theory, that in order to prevent Jesus, fully God and fully man, from coming to the earth, Satan has attempted many different tactics over the years, even as far as tempting Jesus directly when he was on earth after his 40-day fast. But back here, it is possible that one of the tactics that Satan attempted to do was to infiltrate the human race and pervert it, corrupt the human race. Because it is prophesied that Jesus would have, human blood. He would take a human body, but he would be fully divine. So if Satan could corrupt the human genetics, so to speak, it would prevent Messiah from coming. So I know a theory that says that Noah and his family were the only pure-blooded human beings on the earth at that time. Now, I don't know I think that's a little far-fetched. Maybe they were the only pure-blooded human beings of a righteous stature in God's eyes on the earth at that time. Because I've seen some estimates where they said there could have been 1 billion people on the earth for the first 1,500 years of Earth's history up until the flood. So it's possible one of Satan's techniques is to try to infiltrate the human race to prevent the Messiah from eventually coming. If he could corrupt the genetics, the genes of humans and mix them with fallen angels, demons, his demons. Of course, God had another plan. He selects Noah, who finds favor in his eyes. He's a righteous man. He's described in verse 9 as being blameless, walking with God. And one more thing I'll say is we go through the ark here, and then once they're on the ark, in the 600th year of Noah's life, this is verse 11 in chapter 7, it says, all the fountains, the springs of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of heaven were open, and rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. We hear of no rain up until this point. So for the first 1,500 years, we don't hear of any rain. All we hear of back in Genesis, where the Lord created the earth, is that springs came up from underneath the ground to water. You had rivers, streams, and springs. So I'm not sure exactly what that looked like, but this is the first time we hear of rain in Scripture. And there are a lot of people who believe in a canopy theory. I think there's a lot of legitimacy to this. Basically, we know in Genesis 1, God created the earth as a layer above water and below water. He separated the waters with dry land. So some people believe that there was a canopy of water in the atmosphere. Maybe 18 inches would have been sufficient, which would have changed the atmosphere of the earth before the flood by allowing, one of the things it could have allowed was allowed greater oxygen levels on the earth, which would have enabled dinosaurs to live. Because you can't have these huge, massive beings. There's not enough oxygen. The percentage of oxygen on our planet today, they would never be able to survive with the size of their nostrils, to supply their bodies with enough oxygen. So this canopy theory, and they have drilled into bubbles of amber from thousands of years ago and found that that little air bubble that was caught by sap, of a pine tree or whatever, that amber, contained a much greater portion of oxygen levels than we have today. So I think there's legitimacy there. Also, I'd say the fault lines that we see underneath the ocean and all over the world, I believe, is what is being described here in Genesis chapter 7, verse 11 and 12, where it says the fountains of the deep broke open. I believe that God created the earth with water underneath, as he said in Genesis chapter 1, at the time of the flood. Those fault lines broke. There was a shifting maybe in the axis of the earth. The fault lines broke. Water came just under high pressure, came out and spewed into the atmosphere and caused it to rain. It says it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. So I think that's a legitimate theory. And of course, the canopy fell from the earth, and that's from the time of Noah's flood. That's what created the atmospheric conditions that we have today. The cycle, the water cycle that we have today with the clouds and the rain and etc. And then the earth at that time was mostly flat with very few hills, no mountains. But when the fault lines broke and they converged and they began to push up these mountains all over the world, that allowed the runoff of the water that had been under the earth to run off and form. There's some places in the ocean that's miles deep. So everywhere around the earth, there's the earth's surface. It's just that the water that was under the earth's surface has come out and now has run off to the basins, which we would call oceans. Under the oceans is still earth's surface. And now we have some land masses pushed up as mountains and hills, some pushed down. That's where the water runs off, which we would call the oceans. And this was all a result of the catastrophic events which occurred at the flood in Genesis chapter 7. Noah was on the ark for about a year's time, but verse 24 in chapter 7 says the earth was only flooded for 150 days. It rained for 40 days. It was flooded for 150, and for good measure, Noah stayed on the ark for about a year. I could calculate it. I didn't do that, and I don't have it in my margins. But I'm sure a quick Google search would let you know that. All right, so that's all coming from Genesis chapter 6 and 7. Some interesting pieces of information as I continue to read through my daily Bible. All right, until next time, God bless.